So, hello everybody. I'm back. I've just come off the radio actually, doing a Sunday afternoon show on 103 The Eye, which is local radio for Melton Mowbray and the Vale of Belvoir in the East Midlands, which is where I'm originally from. So that'll be a regular thing on a Sunday afternoon, and then I'll be here to read for you. This is my book, Walking on Cinders, and this afternoon we are on to chapter 18, where things start to get exciting, I think. Although I haven't read this book in a very long time, probably since I wrote it, so I'm getting as much surprise out of this as you are as well. So really enjoying being here and reading for you. Chapter 19, even chapter 19. I'm getting this totally wrong here. Chapter 19 of Walking on Cinders for you this evening. Here we go. The French had not fared well in the war to this point. The split between countries and the backhand alliances did not suit them. But there was nothing they could do about it, and so they had to stand as one nation and survive whatever was thrown at them, together. A particular problem for the French government in the years before United rule were their neighbouring countries, those who were supposed to be allies. Germany was heading towards United rule, with job losses the like of which had not been seen since the late 1920s, and a mass evacuation of troops stationed in every current battleground. Germany had always been very prompt at preparing for war, and the French had grown accustomed to the fact that a precursor for the beginning of a conflict was, more often than not, the Germans' call for rearmament. While Germany worked on a battle plan that led its people towards the light of a new republic, the rest of Europe remained eerily silent. Italy, the Netherlands, and many of the Baltic states were playing stalemate. It appeared that no one country was prepared to make a tactical move before another. But while for the most part Europe remained quiet in the years that led up to United rule, France still had to deal with its most problematic neighbour. The English Channel had, so far, been big enough to separate France from Britain, a country in the upthroes of anarchy and revolution. But the Anglo-French relationship was a dangerous topic of discussion, especially amongst the united leaders who had banded together in the face of unspeakable evil. These two European powers had been in almost constant conflict throughout history, fighting against each other to gain the upper hand. Even in the years that led up to United rule, where relations were somewhat cordial and cooperative, each country regarded the other with a little wariness on their own part, due quite substantially to their individual historical differences. Britain was considered iconic, and many were shocked that a monarchy which had lasted well over 4 centuries could once again be overthrown by a simple regime change and the power of the people. But in a modern society, was it really that much of a revelation? After all, the British monarchy was one of the last remaining in the world, and indeed political revolution was by no means a new invention. The leaders of the new RAP, Rights for the Average Person, political faction, had many influences to draw upon: communism, fascism, and of course the exploits of Oliver Cromwell and his parliamentarians, who had succeeded in creating a republican commonwealth in the 17th century. In essence, their ideas were effectively the same, with the newly elected president wholeheartedly embracing the idea of united rule, and then promoting it with an avid success to leaders of the other European states. It brought Britain in line with France, as both were now ruled as united republics. But even this was not enough. With the onset of war and rearmament fracturing discussions, there was an increasing suspicion between the two leaders. Despite this, they had no option but to place their trust in each other. Several years and the majority of a war later, Colonel David Smith was sitting at his desk, his office placed high above the streets of London. He had chosen never to be located at the Ministry of Defence, for he could do without being consistently compared to every bureaucratic half-wit who held a similar position. He was a man on his own, important, and a leader in his field. No, it was far better for him to locate his offices high above the streets of Soho. After all, he was Colonel of the Thames Regimental Barracks, only the greatest in the whole of these United Isles. Colonel Smith was certainly a man who lived for his own personal achievement, but like many in highly respected positions, the Colonel sometimes abused his power. In fact, he was considered by many to hold a very personal secret close to his chest. Pausing mid-flow and looking up from his keyboard, Colonel Smith glanced at a pile of letters stacked neatly beside him on the desk. Many of them would be unimportant, he was sure, just the routine checks that he must complete on certain case files, standard letters from the President sent out to everyone in his position, and catalogues detailing the latest equipment that he could now purchase for his men. But even though the contents would be tiresome and boring, he knew there was a real need to check each and every letter, for he was still in waiting some very important news. Quickly reaching for the pile, he realised he'd been right. There were letters from the president and several thick catalogues, but hiding between them and almost at the bottom of the pile were 2 letters air-marked France, and an official document sent first class from Lenins Bank plc. The latter was strange, for David Smith knew that all of his banking was completed online. He'd never had any problems before. Reaching forwards to pull his penknife from the centre of a pot which contained a variety of different coloured pens, he made light work of opening all 3 letters, and opted to read the official document first. "Dear Sir," it began, in the usual formal tone, "I write to confirm that your most recent payment has not been completed, as of the date—" Colonel Smith scratched his head. This had never happened before. All of his payments went through on time. That was the way that his office ran on a day-to-day basis. Surely it could not be that important. Later he would ring the bank himself. Next he reached for the first of the airmail letters and was surprised to find inside a newspaper clipping and a frantically scrawled note. He recognised the handwriting almost immediately, but the newspaper clipping, that was a surprise. "Read the attached," it said simply, "and I think you will find that all our efforts have been thwarted. The road from this point onwards is very slippery." And it was signed with a simple initial, the letter B. Colonel Smith tossed the note aside quickly and began to read the newspaper article with a far greater interest. What could he be talking about? The plan was certain to succeed. It was almost guaranteed. But as he read the headline and looked at the photograph which accompanied it, his face fell. Domestic disturbance in French village. Farmer arrested. There was a picture of an elderly man, thinning hair, handcuffed and standing beside a broken window, while in the background he could just make out 3 dark figures running in the opposite direction. It was an amateur shot from the scene, taken by an onlooker, and 2 of the 3 figures were unrecognisable, but the third, who was carrying a 4th in his arms, was unmistakable. "Ewan Roberts," the colonel breathed, still staring at the photograph before him. So they did survive. Colonel Smith was shocked, to say the least. For years he had been in this job and nothing had ever gone wrong. His life of luxury had been secure, and yet now there was a single seed of doubt fixed between the pages of his life. Thinking quickly, eyes darting around the room, he reached for the second French envelope and paced over to the window. There he looked down over the streets of Soho and marvelled at the plight of the average Londoner, more careful in these dangerous days of war. For a moment he wondered what it would be like to swap places for just a day. To be normal for once, with no high military position, and the expectation that was inevitably placed upon you. The colonel sighed deeply, his head in his hands. The tired lines beneath his eyes suddenly were more pronounced, and he was about to open the second letter when there was a hurried knock at the door. Wondering what all the commotion could be about at a time when he could really do without it, he flung the letter down on his desk in a fit of temper, sending the contents spewing halfway across the shiny surface, and he paced towards the door, pulling it wide open. Quickly a minor official darted into the room, shuffling from side to side expectantly. "What is it now, William?" David Smith questioned with disinterest. The young official was pale as a sheet. "Well, sir," he began, trying not to catch the colonel's eyes, "I've just received a message from France. Fighting has begun in earnest against rebel reformed troops stationed across the chaîne de Puys. Tomorrow there begins a full-scale offensive across the world, aimed at winning the war. The reformed troops are weakening, sir, but our men are as strong as ever." Colonel Smith was angry. There was a look of thunder about him, streaks of lightning behind the eyes, and his response broke off the official mid-sentence. "What?" he boomed. Staring the man directly in the face for a few moments, he stood there literally quaking with anger, and then suddenly his resolve changed and he weakened. He wiped his brow with the back of his hand, tufts of grey hair pushed back against his forehead, and this time he spoke far more meekly. "Why wasn't I told about this?" The small and timid official merely shook his head, not knowing what to say. "There is one more thing, sir," he muttered. The colonel sighed, but did not stop him. "The president called a few minutes ago. He wanted to know why one of our most superior jets went down in the middle of French territory, close to several reformed strongholds, and why he was not informed about it. I told him I didn't know." "Thank you," Colonel Smith grimaced at last, swallowing hard. "Now, if you could just leave me alone for a while." "Yes, sir. Of course, sir." The official smiled, backing out of the room. He pulled the door shut behind him. He seemed glad the whole ordeal was over. Walking back to his desk, Colonel Smith dropped into a chair and dialed a few digits into the phone with his podgy fingers. The computerized voice on the other end of a line sounded tinny and far away, yet it confirmed his greatest fears. Payment ID 2561921. Payment month and transaction July. Reformed Forces of China, General Chao Yang Li. Payment status transaction unsuccessful. The colonel slammed the phone down hard and once again buried his head in his hands. Things could not get any worse. His story would soon be over and the war would soon be won. His side would be victorious and yet he would not be happy. The reward he had been promised all those years ago would now not come. He would be even more bankrupt, desolate, and without a purpose. It didn't bear thinking about. But perhaps there was still a way to save himself. Wiggling the wireless mouse, he clicked open a new email document and thought about the best way to explain things. "Dear Mr. President," he began, but found himself unable to continue. Beside him on the desk, left unnoticed in the panic that had ensued, was a second letter. It had exactly the same postal address as the first, and was lying next to the neatly opened envelope, its message clearly visible. "The net is drawing in, David," it began. "It will not be long when you are in our sights. Treachery and deception is a court-martial offence, may I remind you, and I do not think the President would approve. We have several of your soldiers here. They are safe and well after a disturbing aviation accident, for which we both know you are responsible. Until next time, do tail." So that is chapter 19 of my book Walking on Cinders. Tomorrow night we're back, 6 p.m, chapter 20 of the novel. Thank you.